The Thornton Gallery occupied prime real estate in Chelsea, its pristine white walls and polished concrete floors the perfect backdrop for contemporary art that sold for 6 and 7 figures. Sebastian Thornton had spent 30 years building his reputation as a tastemaker, the kind of gallerist who could make or break an artist's career with a single show. His office overlooked the main exhibition space, where a solo show by a minimalist sculptor was drawing collectors from around the world. Each piece in the show was priced between $200,000 and $800,000. 3 had already sold on opening night. This was the level Sebastian operated at. Museum-quality work, established artists, serious collectors. His assistant, David, knocked on the open door. "Sebastian, there's someone here to see you. No appointment, but she says she's an artist looking for representation." Sebastian didn't look up from his catalog review. "We don't take walk-in portfolio reviews, you know that. I told her, but she's persistent. Says she only needs 10 minutes. Then she doesn't understand how galleries work. Send her away." "I tried. She's not leaving easily." Sebastian sighed, closing his catalog. Entitled artists who thought the rules didn't apply to them were exhausting. "Fine. Give her 5 minutes, but make it clear this is a courtesy, not an opportunity." The woman who entered his office looked to be in her late 20s or early 30s. She wore paint-stained jeans, a loose flannel shirt over a tank top, and worn boots. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. She carried a large portfolio case that had seen better days and a backpack that looked like it came from a thrift store. Everything about her screamed struggling artist, the kind who worked restaurant jobs to afford supplies, who lived in a cramped studio in Brooklyn, who had more passion than training. Sebastian had seen 1,000 versions of her. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, offering her hand. "I'm Alex." Alex Rivera. Sebastian shook her hand briefly, noting the paint under her fingernails. "I'm Sebastian Thornton, but I assume you knew that, or you wouldn't be here. Your gallery is legendary. The artists you represent are incredible. They are, which is why I have to protect the gallery's reputation by being very selective about who I work with." He gestured to a chair. "You have 5 minutes to tell me why you think you belong in that group." Alex sat, positioning her portfolio case carefully. "I've been painting professionally for 8 years. My work focuses on the intersection of classical techniques and contemporary subjects, Renaissance-style portraiture of modern, marginalized communities." Sebastian's internal assessment was already negative. Classical techniques and contemporary subjects usually meant derivative work that tried to seem profound by juxtaposing old styles with new content. Every art school graduate thought they could reinvent portraiture. "Where did you study?" he asked. "I'm self-taught. I couldn't afford formal art school, so I learned through museum study, online resources, and practice." No formal training. That confirmed Sebastian's assumption. Real artists, the kind who commanded 6 figures, had MFAs from Yale, RISD, or comparable institutions. They had studied with masters, had been mentored through prestigious programs. Self-taught artists occasionally succeeded in commercial illustration or folk art markets, but not in the high-end contemporary gallery world. "Alex, I'm going to be direct. The Thornton Gallery represents artists with established careers, institutional recognition, and significant collector interest. We show work that museums acquire, that critics write about, that appears in major art publications. Does your work meet those criteria? Some of it has been in museums. Which museums? The National Portrait Gallery has one of my pieces. The Smithsonian acquired another for their collection." Sebastian blinked. That was unexpected. The National Portrait Gallery and Smithsonian didn't acquire work from unknown, self-taught artists. "Really? For which exhibitions?" The NPG piece was for their American Voices exhibition last year. The Smithsonian acquired it for their permanent collection afterward. Sebastian pulled up the National Portrait Gallery website on his computer. The American Voices exhibition had been a major show, featuring portraits of influential Americans from diverse backgrounds. He scrolled through the exhibition catalog, and there it was. A painting by Alex Rivera, a stunning portrait of a Latina Supreme Court justice rendered in a style that recalled Caravaggio, with contemporary clothing and setting. The technical skill was extraordinary. The emotional depth was palpable. The wall text noted that the piece had sold to the Smithsonian for an undisclosed amount. Sebastian stared at the screen, recalibrating. This is quite good. Thank you. But one museum acquisition doesn't necessarily translate to gallery success. The market for portraiture is limited. Collectors want work that feels fresh, innovative. My most recent piece sold at Sothebys for $2.1 million. Sebastian's head snapped up. Excuse me? Alex pulled out her phone, navigating to an auction results page. 3 months ago. Portrait of a dreamer, a painting of a young trans activist. Pre-sale estimate was $800,000 to $1.2 million. It sold for $2.1 million after a bidding war. She turned her phone toward Sebastian, showing the Sotheby's results page. The painting was there, with the hammer price clearly listed, $2,100,000. Sebastian felt his professional assessment crumbling. Artists whose work sold for 7 figures at major auction houses didn't need him. They already had representation. They already had collector bases. They already had... If you've had this kind of success, he said carefully, why are you here? You must have galleries competing for your work. I did have representation. Mitchell Gallery in Soho. But we parted ways recently due to philosophical differences about artistic direction. I'm looking for new representation, and your gallery has always impressed me. Sebastian's mind raced through the implications. Alex Rivera was clearly a successful artist. Successful enough that taking her on would be a coup for the gallery. But she'd walked in here looking like a struggling beginner, and he'd treated her accordingly. Alex, I apologize. I made assumptions based on your appearance. If I'd known about your track record, you'd have treated me differently. Yes, I understand that. That's exactly the problem. I don't understand. You didn't ask about my work or my career. You saw paint-stained jeans and decided I wasn't serious. You assumed self-taught meant amateur without looking at the actual art. You judged my potential by my clothes and my lack of formal credentials instead of by my work. Sebastian felt defensive. In the gallery world, presentation matters. How you present yourself reflects on how you'll represent the gallery. Really? Because Basquiat wore paint-stained clothes. Pollock was famously casual. Rothko looked like a regular guy. Some of the greatest artists in history didn't dress like they belonged in your pristine white gallery, but their work spoke for itself. That's different. How? How is it different? Because they were men? Because they're historical figures now? Or because you've learned to accept their casual appearance posthumously while still judging living artists by the same superficial standards? Sebastian had no good answer. Alex stood, picking up her portfolio case. I came here hoping to find a gallerist who cared about art more than image. Someone who would look at the work first, make judgments second. But you decided what kind of artist I was before seeing a single piece. Please, let me see your portfolio. I'd like to properly evaluate your work. Why? So you can represent me now that you know I'm successful? How does that fix what just happened? It doesn't, but I walked in here as an artist with museum acquisitions, major auction sales, and a growing collector base. But because I dressed like I actually work in a studio instead of performing the role of artist for gallery openings, you dismissed me. That tells me everything I need to know about your values. Sebastian stood as well, panic rising. This was a disaster. Alex Rivera was exactly the kind of artist his gallery needed, young enough to be at the beginning of a long career, talented enough to command serious prices, successful enough to bring immediate credibility. And he was losing her because he'd judged her clothes. Alex, please. I made a mistake, a significant one, but I'd still like the opportunity to see your work, to potentially represent you. You had that opportunity 5 minutes ago when I walked through your door, but you spent those 5 minutes explaining why I probably wasn't good enough for your gallery instead of asking to see what I've created." She headed for the door. "Wait," Sebastian called. "What would it take? For you to give me another chance?" Alex paused, turning back. "Nothing. Because the chance you want now isn't the chance you should have given me then. You want to represent successful, established Alex Rivera. But you had no interest in artist Alex Rivera who walked in wearing work clothes. That fundamental judgment, that bias, that's what disqualifies you." After she left, Sebastian stood in his office, David appearing in the doorway. She seemed upset. "Did it not go well?" "That," Sebastian said quietly, "was Alex Rivera. Her work just sold at Sothebys for $2.1 million. The Smithsonian owns one of her pieces, and I just spent 5 minutes explaining why she probably wasn't good enough for this gallery." David's eyes widened. "Oh no. Oh no is right." Sebastian sank into his chair. "Do you know what an emerging artist whose work is already selling for 7 figures could do for this gallery? The collectors she'd bring? The prestige? Can you get her back?" "How?" "She's right. I judged her immediately based on appearance. I didn't even ask to see her work. I just assumed she was another amateur wasting my time." That evening, Sebastian researched Alex Rivera properly. What he found made everything worse. Her work was extraordinary, technically masterful portraits that somehow managed to be both classical and contemporary, traditional and revolutionary. She painted members of marginalized communities with the dignity and technique usually reserved for European nobility. Critics called her work a reclamation of portraiture's power and essential viewing for understanding contemporary American identity. She had a waiting list of collectors. 3 museums were planning to acquire pieces. A major retrospective was scheduled for the following year at a prominent contemporary art museum. She was exactly the kind of artist Sebastian built his reputation discovering early. Except she was already discovered, already successful, and he'd just lost the chance to be part of her trajectory. He drafted an email. "Alex, I owe you an apology that goes far beyond our brief meeting. You were right about everything. I did judge you by appearance instead of asking about your work. I did make assumptions about formal training meaning more than actual achievement. I did prioritize image over art. That's not the gallerist I thought I was, and it's certainly not the gallerist I want to be. I don't expect you to give me another chance. I don't deserve one. But I wanted you to know that your visit taught me something important about my own biases. Thank you for that lesson, even though I'm ashamed I needed it. Wishing you continued success in your career. Sebastian Thornton." Alex's response came the next morning. "Sebastian, thank you for the apology. I appreciate the honesty. For what it's worth, I don't think you're a bad person, just someone operating in a system that has very specific ideas about what artists should look like and where they should come from. But that system excludes brilliant people who can't afford elite art schools or who choose to spend their money on supplies instead of designer clothes. I hope your gallery can evolve beyond those limitations." The message was gracious, which somehow made Sebastian feel worse. A week later, Sebastian saw an article in Art Forum. Alex Rivera signs with Castellano Gallery. The piece detailed how Castellano, a rival gallery in the Lower East Side, would represent Rivera's work. The owner, Maria Castellano, was quoted, "Alex's work speaks for itself. I don't care if she shows up to meetings in coveralls or couture. What matters is the art." The dig was subtle but unmistakable. Word had spread in the art world about Sebastian turning Rivera away. His phone started ringing with other artists withdrawing from consideration, collectors asking questions, critics wanting comment. Sebastian's reputation, built on being a tastemaker, was being redefined as being out of touch, elitist, unable to recognize talent that didn't come with the right credentials or appearance. 2 weeks after the incident, Sebastian held a staff meeting. "We need to change how we evaluate artists," he announced. No more dismissing people based on how they're dressed or where they studied. If someone wants to show us their work, we look at the work first, make judgments second. His senior curator spoke up. Sebastian, we get dozens of artists trying to show us portfolios every week. We can't look at all of them. Then we need better screening criteria. Criteria based on actual artistic achievement, not superficial markers of success. But how do we identify achievement without credentials? By looking at the work. By asking about exhibitions, acquisitions, sales, critical response. By evaluating what they've actually created instead of where they went to school or what they're wearing. The staff exchanged uncertain glances. Sebastian knew he was asking for a fundamental shift in how they operated, but the Alex Rivera debacle had shown him how necessary that shift was. 3 months later, Sebastian implemented a new policy. Monthly open portfolio reviews where any artist could sign up for a 15-minute slot to show work. No credentials required. No dress code. Just art. The first session was chaotic. 20 artists showing work that ranged from extraordinary to terrible, representing every style and level of skill imaginable. But in the middle of those 20, Sebastian found a sculptor whose work was stunning. Organic forms that seemed to grow naturally from industrial materials. The artist was a former construction worker who'd taught himself to weld. He wore steel-toed boots and had calluses that spoke of physical labor. Under Sebastian's old system, he never would have gotten a second look. Under the new system, Sebastian offered him a show. The exhibition sold out. Critics praised the discovery of outsider talent. Collectors bought pieces for significant sums. The artist's career launched, and Sebastian learned that talent could come from anywhere, looking like anything. 6 months after turning away Alex Rivera, Sebastian was interviewed for an art podcast. The host asked directly, "You've implemented major changes at Thornton Gallery after the Rivera incident. Can you talk about what happened?" Sebastian had prepared for this question. He'd crafted various responses that minimized his mistake or reframed it as a learning opportunity. But sitting in the recording studio, he chose honesty. "I turned away one of the most talented artists of her generation because she was wearing paint-stained jeans. I judged her by her appearance instead of asking to see her work. I assumed self-taught meant amateur, without considering that some of history's greatest artists were self-taught. And I lost the opportunity to represent an artist whose work now sells for millions because I couldn't see past superficial markers of success." That must have been a difficult realization. It was humbling, but necessary. I'd built my reputation on having an eye for talent, but I developed blind spots based on class, education, and appearance. I was filtering out brilliant artists because they didn't look like what I expected success to look like. How has this changed your approach? Fundamentally, we now evaluate artists based on their work, not their credentials or appearance. We've discovered incredible talent that would have been dismissed under our old system, and we've had to confront some uncomfortable truths about how the art world perpetuates exclusion. The interview was widely shared in art circles. Some people praised Sebastian's honesty. Others said it was too little too late. But it continued a conversation about accessibility, bias, and who gets opportunities in the art world. A year after their meeting, Sebastian attended the opening of Alex Rivera's solo show at Castellano Gallery. The exhibition was a sensation. Every piece sold before opening night, with prices ranging from $500,000 to $3 million. The waiting list for her work was now 2 years long. Sebastian stood in front of her latest painting, a portrait of a young indigenous environmental activist rendered with technical brilliance that recalled the Dutch masters. It was breathtaking. "Beautiful, isn't it?" A voice beside him, Alex Rivera herself, wearing the same paint-stained jeans and flannel shirt she'd worn to his gallery a year earlier. "It's extraordinary," Sebastian said. "They all are. Congratulations on the success." "Thank you. Though I should probably thank you too in a weird way." "Thank me?" "Your rejection motivated me. Made me realize I needed a gallerist who understood my work and my values, not someone I had to prove myself to based on superficial criteria. Maria got it immediately. She saw the work first, everything else second. She was smarter than me. She was more open-minded. There's a difference. Sebastian nodded. For what it's worth, I've changed how my gallery operates. Open portfolio reviews, evaluation based on work rather than credentials, no assumptions about who can or can't be a serious artist. I heard. That's good. The art world needs more accessibility. It's not enough to undo my mistake with you. No, Alex agreed. But maybe it prevents you from making the same mistake with the next artist. Maybe the next Alex Rivera who walks into your gallery wearing work clothes gets the opportunity I didn't. They will. I promise you that. Alex studied him for a moment. I believe you. People can change. Systems can change. It just takes someone being willing to confront their biases instead of defending them. After the opening, Sebastian walked back to his gallery through the Chelsea night. The streets were busy with art world people moving between openings, collectors discussing purchases, artists celebrating or commiserating. He thought about the artist he'd been a year ago, confident in his taste, certain of his standards, convinced he knew talent when he saw it, and how wrong he'd been. Because talent didn't have a dress code. Success didn't require formal credentials. Brilliance came in all packages, from all backgrounds, looking nothing like what gatekeepers expected. The lesson had cost him the opportunity to represent one of the most important artists of her generation. But it had given him something more valuable, the understanding that his job wasn't to enforce standards about what artists should look like, it was to recognize great art, wherever it came from, however it was dressed. 3 years after the incident, Alex Rivera's work was featured in a major museum retrospective. The New York Times review called her one of the most significant portrait artists of the 21st century, and noted that her work challenges both classical technique and contemporary assumptions about who deserves to be painted with such dignity. Sebastian attended the opening. He stood in front of her paintings, dozens of them now, each one a masterpiece of technique and empathy, and felt the weight of what he'd lost. But he also felt gratitude. Because that 15-minute meeting, that casual dismissal, that spectacular failure of judgment, it had changed him, had forced him to examine assumptions he didn't know he had made him a better gallerist, a better judge of art, a better person. The artist in paint-stained jeans had taught the prestigious gallerist that appearances mean nothing and art means everything. It was the most valuable lesson of his career, and it had cost him exactly one opportunity he never deserved in the first place. If this story resonated with you, remember, never judge art by the artist's appearance or credentials by where they studied. The painter in stained jeans might create work that sells for millions. The self-taught artist might be more talented than any MFA graduate. Share this with gallery owners, art dealers, anyone who makes decisions about who gets opportunities in creative fields. Remind them that genius doesn't have a dress code and brilliance doesn't require formal training. Subscribe to Real Justice Stories for more tales of bias confronted, exclusion challenged, and the power of evaluating substance over appearance. Thank you for watching. Remember, the artist you dismiss today might be creating the masterpieces that define this generation. Look at the work, not the clothes. Judge the art, not the credentials. And never assume you know someone's talent by looking at their outfit.